Greetings, bones and ghouls. It's time for Halloween in July. It's that special time of year where we take the summer to play a ton of scary games because, honest to God, all the horrifying stuff we see in these games is only nominally worse than everything that's happening in the real world. As you all know, if you pledge yearly over at patreon.com/charlatanwonder, you can get the special patron patch as a thank you gift, and anyone who pledges yearly at the $5 recipe tier or higher gets the patron apron as a thank you gift on top of all the benefits for pledging, such as early videos and exclusive bits, and you help support the channel. We're doing even more stuff this year. This year, we also have the Pledge-O-Meter, where any pledge counts towards unlocking cool stuff. Not just yearly ones. Stuff like bonus videos for Halloween in July, like Metro Exodus. Special event streams, like me attempting the Garden of Bonbon Bonthology all in one sitting. Grilling cooking segments. Community game night on the Discord. Stickers on top of all the other stuff you get for pledging yearly. Gamer Thanksgiving turkey. I might even try eating it. And so much more. Any pledge, yearly or not, counts. One-time pledges on Ko-Fi count too. Memberships count. It all counts, and I've put some goals in there for all the things you've been asking for a long time. Tonight's entry into the spooky halls of Halloween in July is Total Chaos, a successor to a Doom WAD of the same name. Yep, Total Chaos started out as a very ambitious WAD pack for the original Doom games that were worked on for years until coming out as a full game in 2018 and winning a CAC award. Did I say that right? Then, late last year, a full standalone remake of this was released, and holy moly, is it a spooky good time. There will be scares, there will be survival, there will be some pretty sick fights against some pretty gnarly monsters, and you bet there's gonna be some super shotgun fun times. Let's take a look at what you're going to be doing for most of the game. Total Chaos is a first-person survival horror. Yes, it's based off a Doom WAD, but it's still survival horror. Geez, I don't even get a proper weapon until about half an hour in. And even then, you're going to have to use it sparingly because degradation is most certainly a thing that you need to be aware of. Stuff will break on you mid-fight if you're careless and leave you in a very bad spot. It's going to take literal hours for you to get your hands on a gun, and that's if you're feeling determined and willing to do some particularly spooky side quests. The bright side of that is that, oh boy, do the guns in this game hit like a freight train. The only gun I wasn't all that fond of is ironically the one that you have the most abundant ammo for, the harpoon gun. I don't mind that it's fairly low damage since the abundance of ammo comes from the fact that you can just go pick up the harpoons after a fight or even in the middle of a fight if you're really desperate, but in how it's the only ranged weapon that has a physical projectile, and that projectile seems to spawn in off to the side of you, meaning that I whiffed a lot of shots owing to trying to shoot at something nearby me from like around a corner or otherwise partially in cover, and the harpoon would bounce off the nearest wall that was right there in front of me instead of traveling down the center of my vision from the business end of the barrel. Most of your combat is going to be melee because you save your guns for special occasions. Melee hits hard. Melee has wind-ups and charge attacks which you are going to need to do with care because enemies will try to mess you up if they see you open and vulnerable, and each variant of a weapon moves differently. It's going to be a deciding factor for which weapon you want to run, not just based on availability, but also what has a good charge attack. Charge attacks get you the long stun if they connect properly, and getting the stun is the difference between a fight being quick and clean or slow and messy. I was pretty surprised with how a pickaxe handles versus a hammer versus a wood axe, and those are just the normal weapons. There's also a whole bunch of stuff that you can make with scrap that's laying around the game. One of my mainstay weapons was literally a rock with a bunch of nails taped to it that is surprisingly effective when you threw it at people. Speaking of, there are weapons that are meant to specifically be thrown. However, any weapon can be thrown. Blunt things will stun enemies. Pointy things can get lodged in an enemy when it connects, which does a ton of damage, but now you don't have a weapon. Some enemies require you to throw stuff at them, like this little guy here that just wants you to feed him a tasty brick. But lucky you, if you end up throwing something at somebody and it connects in a way that you can't get it back, and you have another weapon in your inventory, the logical thing automatically happens. You can throw basically anything. Throw your weapon, throw a knife, throw an empty bottle, throw a bottle full of hard liquor, throw a rock, throw a brick. If you can equip it, it can be chucked at anything that's within chucking range. Be careful though, because some enemies will get tired of this and throw stuff at you. There is a lot of interaction between you, the monsters, and the stuff around you. I wouldn't go as far as to call it kitchen sink design, since they don't think of everything, because you gotta keep a limit on your scope if you want to develop something and get it out the door. But if you throw a bottle of liquor, normally used for disinfecting rags for bandages, at a monster that just so happens to be standing near a burning barrel, it'll set the monster and everything around it on fire. That one's finicky though, and I was only able to pull it off in the tutorial. There is also parrying, but I chronically suck at parrying, so I have no examples to show you. Most of crafting takes into account things that you might even try even if you don't have a recipe for it and you're just experimenting with the serums, where you can basically mix any funny chemicals you find into the old hypos and see what happens. Dashing near an enemy seems to give them an itty bitty stun as you blow past them. It's a really good and fleshed out combat system for a game that is primarily horror. Like really, really good. More on the horror and freaky monsters later though, as I want to talk about that separately in the Spookies. It's not all bonking the scaries with your pickaxe though, as there's a surprising amount of survival in this survival horror. I'll admit, at first I didn't think much of how Total Chaos did survival. It looks a lot like the usual assortment of meters and items you need to keep those meters filled or empty, but the survival aspect comes into how each item hinders something else and the choices you gotta make if you want to stay alive. Running around and swinging your weapon keeps you alive, as monsters tend to die when you do that, but it takes a bunch of stamina and makes you hungry. And while most food items you initially find are just straight up increases to your satiation, even if they're a bit sketchy, you're going to run out of those eventually and need to weigh out the options of taking a health penalty on the ever abundant monster meat. Stim packs, the quickest and most abundant healing item in the game, heal you for a full pip of health instantaneously, but they also inflict hunger and bleed. Any more than 2 stim packs is enough to start actively taking bleed damage too. There are bandages that stop the bleeding and also restore a little bit of health, but those are fairly rare and too rare to be relied upon for consistent healing, and while they are craftable, the booze you need to keep on hand to craft them is heavy, and you need that carry weight for stuff like your weapons, which are also really heavy. Then there's the medkits too, which at first seem like they're just objectively better than any other healing item in the game and have no stat-based downsides, so you start hoarding them, which makes you realize that their downside is that they're really heavy. They're one of the heaviest things in the game that is not a two-handed weapon. This is one of the few games where carry weight is something I legitimately worried about and had to balance and make hard choices about what I leave behind, since you only get so much of it, and even with a few permanent buffs, your weapons are pretty heavy and you need to choose carefully as to what you keep in your backpack, because your primary will break and leave you SOL if you aren't prepared with a backup. So everything else needs to be taken into careful consideration, but everything else is heavy. Guns are necessary for the tougher spots and very, very rare, so you can't just drop them when you need to save weight, but there aren't nearly enough sources of ammo to make them reliable as primary weapons. Now, how about that degradation? It's another thing that ends up working really well, despite me initially thinking it wouldn't once we got into the weeds of getting through levels. I think degradation owes its success to how weapons and the means to make and maintain them are scarce, and keeping enemies at bay isn't the only thing you're gonna need your weapons for. Enter the humble box. No, unfortunately, you cannot stack the box, but boxes do contain stuff, and you need stuff to survive. While there is a fair amount of stuff just laying around on shelves, tables, and on the floor as you go through levels, you're going to need more stuff and to smash up boxes if you want to have enough stuff to survive. And now, just to state the obvious, all uses of weapons cause them to degrade. Boxes or baddies. Now we combine that with the fact that we need to smash up a lot of boxes to get stuff, and the whammy that is not all boxes have useful stuff in them. Usually you're going to have to smash up quite a few to get something useful, and if you're lucky, it's also going to be something you immediately need. I realize that I've been going on about boxes for a pretty meaty paragraph now, and while I know some people will be rather cross about me saying it, screw it. Honorary immersive sim. Write your threads, I won't read them. The silver lining comes from that often when a weapon breaks, it's just the handle that breaks, and you still get to keep your hammer or axe head, whatever it is. And then when you find a new thing that can be used as a handle, and some of the thankfully abundant wood glue, you can put it all back together and have a good as new weapon. You can also use stuff you find to make them better than new, like duct tape to reinforce the handle for longer use time, or barbed wire to increase damage. I'm not quite sure how exactly that all works, but I'm happy it does. I'm also surprised by just how how much crafting there is in this game with a ton of recipes, and more surprised that it never got stale. You're gonna want to get good at survival because while you can hit pretty hard, enemies hit hard too. For reference, I play on the default difficulty, which is a solid step down from survival mode, and did not use Satoris mode, which is basically a level select system that also lets you start with certain sets of items and disable things like weapon degradation. I'm playing just on good old-fashioned default. At all difficulties, even the most basic monsters are going to chunk your HP bar pretty bad, and any monster can kill you quick if you're being careless while fighting them or running into a situation where you're going to be in over your head. Always kite. It helps a little if you know your way around old school style shooters, aka being able to spot when a room you're about to enter is going to just dump a bunch of monsters on you. Without getting too much into the aesthetic design of the monsters, as again I want to talk about that more in the Spookies. One of my favorite things about Total Chaos is each new monster is also a new puzzle you gotta solve outside of just shooting at it until it dies. The rank and file monsters are easy enough, as they're just kind of spongy, but then we get into the Electro Ghost guys, which start as something you've just gotta run away from, but eventually teach you about throwing things to stun enemies. The Spider things, which geez, these are freaky, have it to where they're initially completely inert and you can't sneak past them, but if one wakes up, they all wake up, and you gotta learn how to stun with power attacks and how to be proactive to bring dudes down fast. Oh yeah, don't try running away from these guys when they wake up or they will blind you. Then there's the chompy guys that we feed the bricks, the explodey guys, the red light green light enemy, the psychic guys, and so much more. I'm also really surprised on how well of a job they do at remixing monsters by putting them in situations with different monsters, or how with the red light, green light enemy, they keep it fresh by changing up the scenario with more than one of them, or putting you in a hedge maze with them. She's one of the better red light, green light enemies I've seen in a game, and there have been some really good ones of those. Heck, she's not even the only type of that enemy in Total Chaos. Now, something else I want to shine a light on is that yeah, you very much can tell this is a remake of a Doom Total Conversion. Not necessarily as a negative thing, but more in a seeing stuff and going, oh yeah, that's a Doom thing. If anything, this is very much an if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of deal. The first and most abundant thing that you'll see are what I call vestigial monster closets. Back in ye olden times, you couldn't just spawn an enemy into a level like you could in almost every game ever now. So what games like Doom did was have all the baddies already spawned into a level, hidden behind secret doors or something, and then when you do a certain thing, those secret doors would open, unleashing the monsters on you. These are affectionately referred to as monster closets, and yes, I am currently playing the Steam version of Doom 1 and 2 for this video, because I just felt like buying it and one of those new tunes from the Night Dive version. Sidebar here, am I crazy, or is playing this version of Doom with mouse look feel like driving a track car after spending most of your life driving a normal commuter car? The first time I played, and even after turning off as much as like the extra quality of life stuff as I could, I was like zipping around the map like, whoa, this is fast. Moving on though. Doom was made in 1995, and we have come a long way since needing to have everything pre-spawned into a map. However, Total Chaos was originally built inside of Doom's framework, so back in the day, it needed to have these monster closets. The result of this is that often monsters will jump out at you from these odd little hallways that don't really have doors or anything and just lead to nowhere. They're kind of confusing for a bit when you're first playing, as Total Chaos doesn't hold your hand with any sort of auto map, and the only time you do get a map is if it's part of a puzzle. Then, as you play more and more, you realize what they are and you just sort of go, oh hey, monster closet. I think some of them did have stuff at the end of like their little hallways though, but we know what these are for. There are normal monster closets too, mostly in the form of rolling storefront doors. These are a little more obvious and more like a little way of the game telling you, hey bro, you're about to get jumped. Almost like a test to see if you're taking care to observe your surroundings and not just plowing through levels as fast as you can. Oh, there's also secrets. I was really bad at finding them, and also I was being really stingy with my weapon use for durability, but they're definitely there. The loading screens say so, and I did find one or two on my own. Look for big cracks in walls and big X's to mark the spot. There's also more obvious stuff, like the way you get your first shotgun on the first major level, but that's less secret hunting and more of a bravery test, as you're literally given a map that tells you, hey, go through the spookiest part of the spookiest area in this level, get the key, and then if you make it back alive, you can use that key to get the shotgun in this room that's very obviously sitting right there on the other side of this window. I checked this one. You cannot just slip in through the back if you've already went through that area. You gotta slip right past the spider guys, right through the middle of them from the front. And then you gotta get out of there quick because once you hit the switch to open the door where the key is, that door is loud and it wakes them all up. There's also a fair bit of good old-fashioned Doom puzzling. We might not be looking for colored keys, but we're certainly going around deeper into the map to look for an object that grants us deeper access into the level. It will probably have a whole bunch of monsters waiting for us just inside of these odd dead-end hallways. There will be plenty of throwing switches to get things working, and a couple of which switch do I hit first puzzles. Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Not key hunting isn't so bad, as it's the reason to be going around the level and looking for things. That means we're not just in a bunch of corridor set pieces. There arguably are set pieces in Total Chaos, but it's less alongside the lines of, hey, we're gonna put the cinema bars on and you're just gonna sit pretty while cool stuff happens in the distance, and more, hey there bucko, we're about to put you in a situation. I'll admit that I did get lost quite a bit in Total Chaos, owing to how there's no auto map and how levels can be sprawling, but there are enough physical landmarks and bits of literal signposting that aren't heavy-handed to where I never had to go look up a map in a guide or anything like that. It was more like a case of me getting lost and then realizing, oh, there are actual signs directing me to this place where people would reasonably need signs to direct them to. I guess I need to pay more attention. One last traditional Doom puzzle that we all know and love for just how much of a little stinker it can be is the good old-fashioned, hey, guess what? You're getting jumped. The puzzle is not to die. Which, you know what? Fair. With the way that enemies work, it can indeed be very puzzly as to how you deal with a bunch of enemies in a bunch of different, they all got little things, you know what I mean. It just works. Finally, because you can't not talk about it, you do get the super shotgun, which is an entirely separate entity from the shotgun that you get for the rest of the game. This is kind of spoilers, but not really, and I want to tell you anyway. There's a segment of this game where you lose all your stuff you've been collecting and hoarding for the entire game. It's fine. The game straight up warns you at the start of that level that you can't take anything with you before a certain point, and repeatedly advises you to blow through all your stuff. There's certainly no shortage of tough enemies for you to use your stuff on either. You are then plopped into a wholly new area and given a revolver, which you've already had before. It's perfectly serviceable. And then the super shotgun. I don't care what they call it. It's the super shotgun. And it's one of the better moments in a game already full of some really good moments, as you get the catharsis of easily blowing enemies away to the point that there's a good chance you'll get carried away and burn through all your ammo, which they're being very generous with in this level. It's a ton of fun, and if there was ever an homage to be made in regard to Doom, it's this. This is easily one of the best Doom homages I've seen. And you know what? I'm with all of this. I love it with all the little bits left that shows how this game was once a total conversion of a game that is now 30 years old. I think it's a nice indicator of how far the creators of this game have come since they started. Sure, it can be key hunting with a bit of dressing up at times and vestigial monster closets, but it works for this game. If anything, it shows how well the core tenets of Doom's level design work and how with proper application, they can work in formats well outside of the early 90s shooter archetype. I almost want to say just like id and build engines, but I'm sure there's a lot more stuff going on in that time period, since back then, who knows how many people were just making their own engines and following Doom's stylings. You, get what I mean though. We're doing something a little different this time around for the cooking segment. I'm going to show you how the same dish was cooked across 3 generations of my family. Mac and cheese. I've done a version of mac and cheese before where I was just going for something big and hearty, but now I'm going to show you how I normally do it, and then how my mom did it before me, and then how Grandma Latan did it before her. Let's start with Grandma Latan's recipes, as it's the simplest by far. Mama Latan was one of 5 kids, so Grandma Latan didn't have time to mess around. It's as simple as this. Boil a package of macaroni according to instructions, strain it, now get 1 pound bag of shredded cheese and a can of your preferred tomato sauce. Mix it all together, pour it in a greased casserole dish, bake for half an hour, serve. I actually did something sort of like this when I was first moving into my own home and learning my own cooking techniques, where I just take a box of the Kraft macaroni and cheese and add a few ladlefuls of marinara sauce once it was done cooking. This version is extremely easy and extremely efficient. It's literally 3 ingredients. Mom's is a step up from Grandma Latan since we were a family of 4, so it was less of a feeding frenzy in the house. It starts out most of the same. In fact, for the earlier parts of my life, Mother Latan's mac and cheese was the same as Grandma's. There's a couple things done differently though. First off is that the mac and cheese mix is augmented with some Parmesan added into the cheddar for more flavor. Easy enough. Then, once it's all in the casserole dish, we're going to lightly cover the top of the whole thing with some breadcrumbs, cook half the time covered and half the time uncovered so they don't burn too much. Look at us, we've moved up from 3 ingredients to 5. Okay, time for the way I'm presently doing mac and cheese. I've been doing a lot of experimentation with mac and cheese, including things like how much protein I can reasonably put in it and how yellow I can make a mac and cheese. But what we're doing now is presently my mainstay for when I actually feel like just eating this stuff for fun. I just wanted to see if I could do those previous things, you know? First order of business is we gotta make the sauce. Finely dice a yellow onion and put it into a high-walled saucepan with a generous amount of olive oil and let that sweat out for a few minutes. Once they're fragrant and kind of soft, add in 2 pounds of lean ground beef. If you're worried about cholesterol, sub out 2 pounds of beef for 1 pound of diced up chicken. I've tried adding the equivalent amount of chicken, and it just doesn't work as well as the chicken dries out too much, and also the sheer mass of the chicken kind of crowds out the macaroni. Turn the heat up to medium-high and use a wooden spoon to break up any chunks of ground beef and continuously stir. Once it's all brown and pebbly, take 2 cans of diced tomatoes and a can of tomato paste and put it in a blender and pulse just a couple times so that it's blended, but there are still plenty of good-sized chunks in there. Then pour that in. Then add some red pepper flakes, parsley, basil, oregano, salt, and pepper all into the saucepan with the beef, and keep that down to medium-low while we make everything else, and stir occasionally so it'll cook down nicely. Now, start bringing water in a large pot to a boil, generously salt it, and add in your macaroni to cook, cooking for 2 to 3 minutes less than what the box says. And while that's going, start grating bricks of cheese. You want 16 ounces of sharp cheddar and another 8 ounces of mozzarella all mixed up into the same bowl. Optionally, grate up some Parmesan cheese too and keep that separate to put over the top of the whole thing later. Now, once the macaroni is done, reserve at least a cup and a half of starchy pasta water. Now, strain the pasta, add the beef sauce and cheese all into the main pot, add the starchy water too, and then pasta back in, start stirring like there's no tomorrow. It's gonna take a sec, and for a little while it's gonna look like you've messed up, but don't worry, you haven't. It just takes a while to become a nice even mix. Once it's all mixed up good, pour it all into a greased up or sprayed down casserole dish, top with Parmesan if you opted to shred that, and then throw in that sucker at the oven for 400 degrees of freedom heat units or 205 funny baguette units for half an hour to 45 minutes, depending on how crispy you want that top. Then, pull it out, let it rest for at least half an hour so it's nice and solid, and serve. Behold, Beef Mac. Beef Mac is a hearty staple of my household and has 50 grams of protein per serving with 8 total servings, and it tastes pretty good on top of it. Beef Mac is how I get it done. These, plus all the other recipes for this year's Halloween in July extravaganza, are all available on patreon.com/charlatanwonder as standalone videos with full recipes and nutrition facts, where we're running that special where any yearly pledge at the $5 recipe tier or higher gets you this year's patron apron as a thank you gift on top of all the benefits that patronage gives you. And now it's time for the spookies. Total chaos hits you with just about everything, and that includes a lot of jump scares. Monsters will literally jump out at you from around corners, or sometimes it feels like they're coming out of the goddamned walls, or in this case, the monster closets. Big loud stuff will just happen in an instant because they want to scare you and they don't have any concerns about good scares. There's a lot of just about every kind of scare in this game, from environmental, story-related stuff, freaky monsters that scream at you, stuff you can't see, stuff that you can see and really wish you did it, ambience, and spooky music. Any way this game thinks it can get you, it is going to try. There's just about every kind of scare in this game, and I respect it. The best way I can describe the energy of Total Chaos is that it's like a particularly good year at a theme park haunted house. They've got a little of everything, and they're going to use it. Like, sure, I was kind of annoyed at the jump scares at first, but as I got deeper in, I came to realize that it's only a part of what they're doing, not a thing they are solely relying on. I think that's why jump scares in general are viewed as a negative thing, because usually the people that are doing them don't know how to get a better scare out of you in any other way whatsoever, and if they're that incompetent, they're probably not competent enough to properly set up in time a jump scare. If you go to a place that does know what they're doing though, they will use jump scares as scare actors or whatever else they're gonna throw at you strategically with a ton of other things that make them an effective part of a well-executed scare factory. This is also how I describe how Total Chaos does it. They're there, but they're not the whole thing. They're just one of its many tools. Like I was saying, there are other things like the environment that are built to spook you. Before we even get into the especially freaky stuff, the island itself is already dripping with the spookies. The game starts with you sailing over to it in choppy waters. Also, a nice touch that you can steer the ship to make the energy drink roll around. And just to show you how isolated you are, when you get there, it's already pretty freaky because no one is around. You're in a place where there should be plenty of people, but no one is in sight. Then the decrepit nature of the place does an excellent job of building tension until you're finally confronted with your first enemy. This guy is literally the basic rank and file enemy in Total Chaos, but just one of them alone, being unarmed and trapped in an area trying to find a way to escape, is plenty scary enough. And then they do the exact same thing again not even 20 minutes later, and it still works because the atmosphere is that good. Monsters have some great design, from the first guy to the electric shock guy we just mentioned, the spider things, geez they are freaky, and later game enemies like the ceiling guys and John Dead Space. Every monster having their unique mechanic makes them even more memorable on top of their design, like how the ceiling guys are like the red light green light monster, except you control when we have red light and green light, and you can kill them if you're determined enough. In fact, if you're really determined, you can clear out this entire area and just stroll on through. Then there's how the sidekicks force you to not look at them, and whatever is going on with these guys that are only visible right as they're exploding. There's the thing in the library, stuff you can't see at all, like whatever's in the tunnel, and the mother, which for most of the time, you can't even hurt it and you just have to run away. There's another thing I'm fond of on that note, is that Total Chaos is throwing together all of the spooky in forms of gameplay too. We've got the standard freaky things that are going to kill you, then we've got multiple forms of the red light green light monster, there's stuff you have to quietly creep past, unless you think you can take out a whole bunch of them in a fight on their home turf. And then there's hordes of enemies from out of nowhere that might just outnumber how many munitions you have, or you can only swing the pickaxe so fast. There's even some of that Amnesia style hide from the monster stuff when you're trying to get into the storage unit that gets you something to confront the mother. Total Chaos is pulling out all the stops all the time, and nothing ever gets stale thanks to the sheer variety of it all. And that's just the start of the island. There's so many other places they nail down the atmosphere. The foggy storm at the residential area, the creepy flesh pits that the spider things live in, the freaky woods, and the library. There's been so much effort put into every locale that goes into Total Chaos, and it's never not freaky. And then you get into the low sanity stuff. Total Chaos has a sanity system, but it's not like Amnesia or other ones where looking at bad thing gives you debuff. You will lose sanity at specific moments in the game where you need to give in to whatever is going on in the island to progress, where things are going to get especially freaky. The world turns into that weird flesh stuff that the spider things seem to live in, and reality does all sorts of things you'd expect when normal is now a suggestion. They never really push it too far though, and the times you're in the insanity mode are few and far between. Plus you can instantly nullify the effects at the nearest save station once you're somewhere safe. There's reasons why you might not nullify the low sanity effects if you're going for a certain ending though. My personal favorite out of all these is probably the library, but it's a close call between that and the storm. I think what sets the library apart from others is that on top of the unique atmosphere, there's also the gameplay portion of it where you take a break from fighting the monsters to deal with one particularly nasty baddie while trying to solve a level spanning puzzle. Speaking of the library, a lot of the spookies are also baked into the puzzles and level objectives, like how I previously mentioned during the first major level, you gotta go into the freaky spooky spider thing nest and quietly pass through in order to get to the next stage. The library is the best example of this, as it's one big old puzzle where you gotta solve the puzzle all while a big freaky thing is chasing you around as big freaky things do. Then there's the low sanity stuff, the good old fashioned you gotta go to the spooky place and do the thing moments that are all very effective. I especially appreciate that as a number of games I played in Halloween July in previous years just had you doing whatever, and then there are parts with scary stuff in them, or the monster is not super related to the puzzle like the thing in the library is. But I think that average has been thrown off because we did one year that was exclusively mascot horror. Let's talk about the story and world building now, because it's high time we did so. The premise of Total Chaos is we are an, at the time of starting the game, unnamed protagonist who works as a Coast Guard rescuer. You receive a distress call off the coast of an island and you head right out there on your lonesome. You arrive at the island and, oh, there's no one here. There's a special achievement ending here if you just get back on your boat and leave. I appreciate that the devs let you do that, even if it means you miss out on the entire game. If you don't do that, the protagonist decides to press on into the increasingly decrepit and dangerous places, and, something here feels very off. Okay, that's all I can say without getting into finer details. No spoilers yet, but we gotta go deeper. We get contacted from someone we'll eventually learn to be a man named Tyler over the radio. Tyler seems to be the only person trying to help us right about now, and is very much the Atlas to our Jack Bioshock. Tyler says a lot of concerning things about how he feels like we've been rejected by other people, left behind, or otherwise betrayed. Stuff that initially comes off as kind of edgy, but I swear it pays off. There's someone else trying to help us too. He doesn't show up much, but he shows up in person as compared to Tyler and seems to be sincerely trying to get us out of this jam. Tyler doesn't trust him though. Dude straight up saved us from this freaky spider things, but Tyler is absolutely not having it. Tyler wants us to go further into the island and eventually deep into the mines. The other guy just seems interested in saving us, maybe even getting us out of the island. There's also lots of other entities that Tyler seems to have a past with, like her, who we have to get the machine gun to deal with, or these other things that don't seem to attack us but aren't exactly helping us out. We're not sure what exactly is waiting for us at the other end of the mines, but Tyler is the only one who's been consistently with us, as the other guy just sort of disappears at times. That is, if we let him live. A lot of the themes start to emerge as we play. Isolation, abandonment, sickness, betrayal. This is sometimes manifested in bosses, sometimes it's in the hallucinations and other flashbacks we get. Something bad happened here. Or maybe something bad happened to us. Is this place even real? There's lots of notes and eventually things like recordings of phone calls and letters that seem to contradict what Tyler is telling us. That there are people trying to reach out and help us, but Tyler says they're untrustworthy. There's a lot of also how things look excessively decayed, more so than even an island that was abandoned would yield. It's almost hyperbolic. Then there's all this flesh stuff around the island, like an uncontrolled growth that threatens to consume everything. And finally, just before we get to the mines itself, we have to find a way to withstand a massive amount of radiation exposure to make it through a tough passage. Okay, spoiler time. You know what to do if you don't want them, and you have been warned. Go to the timestamp. Going, gone. We are Tyler. All of this may or may not be some sort of delirium about what we've been going through in life up until this point. Tyler was working his job at the Coast Guard, where he comes across an island and decides to make a life for himself there with the people working at the mines. It's good enough. There's people there he meets and things he does. But then we get the big whammy. Tyler was diagnosed with lung cancer, and the island does not have the facilities to give him proper treatment. We aren't given specific minutiae on how exactly Tyler goes about his treatment, but we can find a message about how he's in remission. Any way you do it though, treatment for cancer like that is gnarly and never an easy ordeal. Regardless, Tyler has a new issue. He was abandoned by all those around him during his treatment, or at least that's the way it felt to him. Perhaps this is where or why we get the conflicting information about what Tyler, the voice on the radio, tells us versus what all the notes and recordings we find say. There's also how phones will frequently ring from somewhere, but we can never pick them up. Maybe Tyler's friends and loved ones were trying to reach out. Maybe it's a case of how when you're stuck in a hospital or undergoing some pretty intense treatment at home, anything can feel like isolation since you can't really get out all that much. We eventually make it through the island, real or otherwise, and into the mines where the real delirium starts. The monsters keep coming, and the only way to escape is to enter a maze filled with giant monsters we cannot possibly kill, which loom over us as our only recourse is to hide from them as they pass by. And then we get to the end of it all, and we have to fight Tyler himself. It's a really good final boss fight. It's intense, straightforward enough without being dull, and really is a good test of all the skills you've built up playing the game. Defeating Tyler isn't a real victory though, since, well, we've essentially defeated ourselves. Without getting too into it, this is not a happy ending. But there is another. If you are really determined, there is indeed a good ending you can get that requires you to find a secondary way to deal with all the major objectives in each level. Things that are pretty hard to figure out on the first time around, especially considering that for one of them, Tyler on the radio straight up tries to discourage you from doing it, and there's this freaky invisible enemy there too. Sometimes you'll get hints on what you need to do. Sometimes it's going to take a lot of ingenuity, but it's possible. Maybe that's also a metaphor, that even if it's a Herculean effort, it's always possible to find a happy ending, even in the darkest of times. Total Chaos has been one of my favorite horror games in years. It pulls off having a ton of scares with a lot of variety in those scares, solid combat that doesn't depreciate the former, compelling survival elements, a great story, and it somehow makes things like a crafting system and weapon durability work in a horror game. Trigger Happy should be proud of what they've made here. This is a great game and is absolutely worth your time. They also added a whole new game plus mode earlier this year that remixes levels and lets you go at it again, which is great for trying to get the better ending. And at $25 on Steam, you get a lot of spooky for a really good price. Before we go, don't forget that it's Halloween in July, and that means on top of all the spooky games over at patreon.com/charlatanwonder, anyone who pledges yearly gets the patron patch, and anyone who pledges yearly at the $5 recipe tier or higher gets the patron apron as a thank you gift for supporting the channel. And don't forget, any new pledge, yearly or otherwise, on any platform contributes to the Pledgeometer, where we can unlock special new videos, new rewards for yearly pledges, special community streams, community events, and so much more. Now let's sign off. Remember that no matter what you do, be it drawing, making skate videos, or metaphors, what you do is art, not content. Art is sacred because it is the embodiment of all your skills, passions, and aspirations, and it's a reflection of you by the very act of its creation. So go get out there and fight for yourself by fighting for your art. Stay saucy.
Saucy boy, are you enjoying the chair?
Are you aware that it's not for you? I know we got rid of the box, but the chair is not for you. Your legs aren't even long enough to reach the ottoman. Is this your new endgame? Oh, hope this ottoman can support my weight. Sir, this is not your chair. You gotta go. You gotta go. Oh, wait. Yes, this is what the chair is for. Oh, don't you? No, don't dig. We just got the chair. Don't dig your claws in. Maybe this wasn't the smartest move on my end. Don't look at mommy. She can't save you. This is mommy's chair. You are not mommy. It's not your chair.